5:15. It is 5:15, and so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you for the guests that have showed up today. Be sure that you sign in at the back. If you all stand so we can say the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes. Okay, I just want to announce most board members are here. Aaron Roberts is also attending, and he is on the phone and will also be part of the meeting here tonight. Next item, item B, is school board norms.
The board-developed norms are to share and respect varied opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, to prudently prioritize resources in a student-centric manner that aligns with the district's strategic plan, to exhibit a mindset of continuous improvement through adequate preparation for meetings and a commitment to board education, to commit to assessing board effectiveness to ensure high-quality governance for the staff, students, and community of Jamestown.
Thank you, Dan. Item C is public communications. I'm not aware of any. Item D, are there any conflict of interest with the agenda today? Hearing none. Then we'll go to Roman numeral 2, consent agenda. And this is where we would need a motion to approve, or if there's something that you would like to pull out specifically to talk about, we certainly can do that. Motion by Roger, second by Cahill to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Roman numeral 3, down to our regular meeting. Item A is recognition. I don't believe you have any recognitions. Item B is correspondence. We don't have any correspondence. Item C is reports. Item 1 of the reports is Superintendent-elect's report.
All right, thank you, President Allen. I do have my written report, and you should have that in front of you. Just highlight a few areas. I wanted to recognize Greg Allen doing some historical research. I want to recognize Greg Allen's 27 years of service on the Jamestown School Board, and that makes him the longest-serving school board member in the history of the district. And so I want to make sure that we recognize him for his long-standing commitment to the district.
Thank you.
What's the state record? Is that within reach, or?
I don't know what the state record is on that, but
I won't be here quite that long. Thank you, Jim.
Moving on, health and safety updates. I think as a board, as a community, we would all be happy to have the pandemic in the rearview mirror, but the reality is that is not the case. And we need to continue to provide the best quality education that we can for our students in Jamestown Public, while also prioritizing health and safety for all of our stakeholders, our staff, our students. This is, and I know we hate to say, but this continues to be a fluid situation. It's just the reality of of the environment that we're working under. So some of the things that we're doing, we're continuing to collect and analyze data on a daily basis. We get all of that information from the state or from parent notifications every day. That's something we look at. I track I look at it every day, track it on my spreadsheet 3 times a week. We report it out on Fridays of every week. So we report that out on our listserv. We look at positives, those impacted by quarantine for staff and for students, and then we also post that on the website. So if the community is interested in that, they can look at on our website as well. You can see later on, I did do a snip of the Friday report. You can look at that as well and to see, I can tell you we're trending up, and I think that is pretty consistent with what we're seeing across the state and in the community. We're trending up. The numbers that we have now are consistent, just for context, the numbers we have now are consistent with where they were looking in late spring. So late April, early May, they're very consistent numbers. But there are other factors and trends that we do get information on. There's some testing that occurs at the local level. We get information on that. The trends are looking like they will continue to increase based on what we know right now. We know that our high water mark was November. It looks like, and again, things change, but the trends are that that October may look like November of last year, and November was our high water mark. And so we need to continue to be vigilant. We need to continue to support families and staff that choose vaccination if that is the right option for them. Make those available as we can. And when we do vaccination clinics, Central Valley Health, just the typical vaccinations that we provide will include, or they have asked and we've agreed to provide the appropriate vaccination for COVID at that time as well, if a family chooses that. Another trend that we see that's really consistent with last year is the impact in the family unit. So when we see positives, the household contacts, oftentimes the household contacts become positive. And I think that's important when we look at our positive numbers to notice that trend. It is not unusual for us to see a student as a household contact transition to a positive. That's not unusual at all. It happens pretty frequently in homes. And so that's a trend that we're seeing right now is larger families that are making that household contact to positive transition. And that's something that we certainly are seeing now. So I don't have any suggestions to change any strategies that are in place now, other than continue to advocate that families make the choice that is right for them. It's certainly, we're recommending masking, and so if families are supporting masking, we certainly support that in school. I think it's an important mitigation strategy that we've seen, but for now, that is a recommendation. Those that have those opportunities to vaccinate, and if that's the right option for a family, again, we don't make that choice for families. Families need to make that choice for themselves. But we do see that impacting families. For example, as a household contact, if a student is a household contact, they are out of school. If they are vaccinated, they can conditionally come to school in a household contact situation as long as they're asymptomatic and they're wearing a mask. Those are students that would not see that long span of time out of school, or staff for that reason, for that example. So those are just things that we need to continue to be cognizant of, and as we are doing, we need to continue to be fluid and watch what's happening in the environment. I think we have a good handle on it. We're certainly tracking it, and we'll continue to be responsive to what the data tells us, but that is where we're at as of September 7th.
Gail.
Excuse me for that. I'm going to relay a couple questions I've got. One is, are there anything that we're doing for those parents who wish to have their children masked to make them feel that that's an okay norm for them to follow? Are there staff or people who are supporting that so that someone doesn't feel like they're the sore thumb in their classroom? That was a question from one mother where her kids she wants them to mask, but they're very concerned. I got that one while I was out walking one day when I got stopped. The second question that same one had to me and I didn't have the answer for is her concern for people that her family may visit. So if there's a student who sat next to her child and they sat next to each other within a 3 feet or at the same table all day, would she be made aware so that she could watch for those signs or not pass that on or take extra precautions? And where are we at with that kind of contact tracing? Are those parents providing that information or getting finding out from a contact tracer from the state, if not from us anymore, and just where does that stand? So those were the two big questions I have gotten. So, thank you.
So we have talked consistently about the requirement for, or the respect we need to give to all sides. That means those that choose to mask and those that choose not to mask. And absolutely, if a family feels the need to mask, we want them to feel comfortable to mask. And if they were not feeling comfortable for whatever, they would just need to talk to their classroom teacher or the building principal, because we don't want to be having any child feel poorly about whether they're in a mask or the clothes that they're wearing or where they come. That should never happen. And so we want to be able to address that if that is the case. And we absolutely support that choice. The second question, we don't contact trace at school. At least that is not in our health and safety plan as it stands on September 7th. The responsibility lies with the family. As they're conducting contact tracing with the state, they're going to get a phone call. They're going to be asked, who are you in close contact with? The state's going to ask them to contact those that they felt they have been in close contact with. As we don't close contact trace, that falls on the family to provide that to others.
So just to get a clarification, the only way that parent would know then would be if that child said, I sit next to so-and-so in class.
Correct. Other question?
Diane?
I have two questions.
I just got out.
Okay. The first one is, I assume we have absolutely no idea what percentage of our student body is vaccinated. And secondly, of the 17 that are testing positive, have we had any very serious reactions or hospitalizations? Do we know?
That's not information that we have. We don't receive that type of information. We do get noticed from the state when that occurs. And like I said, I do think it's important that we note the trends that we're seeing, as I stated earlier, are very much associated with household contacts and positive. If we look at our what we call presumed in-school transmission, that's at zero. We don't believe that there has not been anybody in quarantine that has become positive that we're aware of.
This might also be unlikely to be answered, but do we have any sense from the aerial view of how many students may be coming to school with what appears to be a cold or may be asymptomatic and are simply not going through a COVID test? So do we have any sense of what's going on with COVID in our schools?
We don't know who is testing and who is choosing not to test. We only know that we have infectious disease policy, and that means that the symptomatic student, that could be the flu, that could be COVID. The expectation is if they are symptomatic, and we've doubled down on that strategy and really wanting to make sure that our families are, and staff for that matter, are staying home. If they are symptomatic or if a child is symptomatic, we need them to stay home. That's never been more true. That's always been true, but it's never been more true than it is in the middle of the pandemic.
And I pretty much knew the answers to those questions were going to be, we don't know, but I did want the public to know that we're doing everything we can, but we don't have a complete, firm grasp on what's happening in the student body.
Well, we do have, we collect very good data that comes to us from the state that allows us to take, to analyze the data and make recommendations on how to proceed. I think we have pretty good data there. But the community as a whole, I would say that there is not the same level of commitment to testing that there was at this time last year. I think that would be safe to say that people are opting not to test, although I would say for the most part there are a lot of, like loss of taste and smell, for example. Those symptoms really only come They are only symptomatic of COVID. They aren't symptomatic of, a runny nose or sore throat. That could be a lot of different things. Loss of taste and smell. And I think when people get to that point, they are testing. At least I'm completely anecdotal, but that's what I believe. I think what the difference is with minor symptoms, we don't see the same commitment to testing that we saw at this time last year, if that makes sense.
Jason, then Gail.
Right, keeping an eye on the data and whatnot. Are we also still keeping those lines open as frequently with like Central Valley Health? Are we still, keeping those at a heightened level we were last year?
Yep, the Central Valley Health is still a key piece for us. They provide recommendations just like the state and the Department of Health and the CDC provide guidelines and recommendations, but ultimately we have to decide what is the right fit for Jamestown Public Schools, just like Medina has to, and Bismarck Public and West Fargo. But they still give us good recommendations, and I would say we have a great relationship that continues pre-pandemic to mid-pandemic.
Gail.
Yes, I would reiterate, thank you, Central Valley Health. I know that they've went through a real, there has just been a real onerous task. So, the one thing, so then if we are testing that wastewater, if we're looking at the amount of virus, without the testing, would that give us some clue as to if we're missing virus in our community or what that level might be, even if our testing isn't reflecting it? That would be one question, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Well, we don't test that ourselves. We just get results, and that's kind of where that trend data helps us to realize what's actually in the community as opposed to testing. And so I think you look at what you're seeing as a school district in real numbers, something you can tangibly grasp to, and then other numbers like testing and the great resource we have from Central Valley.
To follow up, I did have the opportunity to listen to the town hall that the North Dakota Department of Health put out today. And one of the things that they wanted at that point, and would be a nice thing to reiterate, is that we do have monoclonal antibodies available for anyone over 12. So just for the public to know, that is proved to significantly reduce hospitalizations and other complications from that. So just their point was to get that word out that we do have that there, and that's something that's available to the people, and that those trends too were similar, except that this year as compared to last year, there's much more transmission in schools, probably for a number of reasons, some that you've highlighted too. That would be exactly mirrored there.
And I'm certainly hopeful too that for those that the vaccine is the right choice for their family, I'm hopeful that those under 12 have that option soon. But again, that's not something we can control, only respond to. Other questions on that?
I'd like to just add a point without getting too deeply or too personally involved, but there was a situation that I'm aware of where the school, someone, I don't know, maybe exhibited some symptoms, and the procedures that they took as a school was awesome to me. They first kind of isolated, because they didn't know, so they isolated the student. I was contacted, here's what we've heard, and so I took the student in, got him tested, it was negative, but their procedures were very, very well. And so I just commend them for doing that, because they weren't sure, but they said, hey, this could be, and it turned out being okay, but their procedures to isolate, to contact someone, and then it was up to them to make a decision. So that's just a real life, real world situation that happened that turned out good.
Yeah, thank you, and I can't stress enough, again, how important it is that if symptomatic staff or students, if you are symptomatic, that you're home. And I know we're North Dakota tough, and that's not something that we like to do. It's just a little cold. Well, right now, it's the time to be precautious if you aren't getting tested. And so one of the we do have testing for our staff if they so choose. We did work with the state again to get more tests So if they need a test, and this is something we're going to talk about tomorrow at my admin team meeting, so staff will be notified through their administrators, but we do have tests again, so that would be set up by appointment. So if a staff member is exhibiting symptoms, they can come in and get tests so they know for sure.
Hey,
I just want to comment, I appreciate the good discussion of the board and Dr. Luck and his team of keeping a close eye daily on the data. And so the public knows that we are continually monitoring this very fluid situation. And so I appreciate the good discussion.
Continue?
yes.
Okay.
please.
So a couple pieces of good news. Food service, we did receive an additional $14,614.62 in special USDA funds that will go into their balance. So that is a nice program that's come. And really, it's related to what we saw a year ago, harder to generate revenue in a pandemic, and it's the USDA's way of recognizing that and infusing a little bit of capital into food service accounts. So that was a positive thing that I wanted to discuss with the board, or at least share with the board. Elementary leadership team, it was requested that I talk about the process and where we are at with the ELT. So we had, I provided a basic overview to all staff, and then what I called an interest form. So those that had a level of interest in the elementary leadership team. You can click on that. You can see the questions that we asked, basically questions about leadership. We wanted to make sure that was a representative group. So we had good, I think, good interest. So 23 staff completed that form. And unfortunately, that means that we wouldn't be able to select everybody. We pick a K through 2 person from every building and a 3 through 5 from every building. And then we have 4 specialists, 1 instructional coach, and then 3 specialists. And so K through 2, we had 9 staff express interest, and there are 5 positions. It was a little bit lower in 3 through 5. We had 6 express interest for 5 positions. We had great representation from our specialists. 7 expressed interest, and we select 3, and 1 coach expressed interest, and we have 1 position. So every position was represented. We'll be making final decisions later on this week on those members, but certainly happy that we got a good response and interest in the ELT. I think it shows it was wise to move forward with the elementary leadership team, and that it filled a void because there's certainly interest. The UJ Shared Project, if you happen to make it to our game last Friday, I don't know if I've ever seen that many people at a football game in Jamestown, which I think is awesome. I had also included in the reports a link to some pictures. I want to give Logan Adams some credit from University of Jamestown. I asked him if he would be willing to come over with his drone and take some aerial photos of the Erstead practice field. He had to go through a process to get FCC approval, some paperwork, and so he did a little extra work for us. I didn't even ask him if I could pay him, and he said nope. So very much appreciate his willingness to do that. It's a vantage point that we aren't going to get without somebody like Logan willing to take those pictures. I think they're great. We've put those out on social media, and I know that Darren Erstead and his family saw them and thought they were great. So nice to give a shout out to Darren Erstead and the Erstead family for a nice donation to help us with this project. So lots of really good information. There are lots of good experiences so far with both Hanson Stadium and Greeno Field, and when we get everything totally completed, on Erstead Field to practice on there as well. Building Tomorrow's Leaders Grant application, that is, you want to give Mr. Gaylor some credit. He's again put forward the Building Tomorrow's Leaders Grant, and that supports some of the community service projects that are in place at the high school, or the community service project that's in place at the high school. And he's finding alternative funding sources, which we appreciate. Because we have expenses like Cognia, that's also in my report, that used to be state funded, and now it is coming back to the local responsibility, and so that's another $20,000 that will have to, or almost $20,000 that will have to be embedded into our budget that the state has picked up in the past, and now that's pushed to us. At Lincoln Elementary, I've been in some contact with Lutheran Social Services, or at least the agency dealing with their property, and asked if we are interested in the Lincoln Elementary lots. I have a picture there. It's lot 1 and 5. Have quite a bit of parking that takes place in those spaces. In the past, we didn't express interest in that property. I was looking at the amount of work that would have to go into resurface and the cost. And they were willing to allow us to continue to park in that lot, even if we didn't purchase. And they have expressed a different feeling as of recently. So they would prefer that we do not park on those lots, and asked again if we would be interested in purchasing the lots, 1 and 5. So that is directly across from the entrance to Lincoln, that larger lot. That is lot 5. Lot 1 is on the block, just around the corner, kind of across from the transition house, a smaller lot by that house on the corner. And so I'm in some conversations with them. If we get to a reasonable negotiation on cost, I may be bringing that recommendation to the board on if they're interested in selling it, and if we're interested in purchasing it at the right price point. So just wanted to keep you aware of that. St. John's Academy was also asked that I share some impact on their enrollment of adding 7th grade. As of August 19th, that included 18 students in that program that would have transitioned over, likely, unless they were moving out of district, to Jamestown Public. So as we look at the funding impact, I just think it's important that you note that difference. The FCC license sale, we had an educational broadband license. We entered into an agreement with QHS not quite a year ago to sell that license. If we hadn't sold the license, it likely would not have been renewed, or it would have been shut down had we not opted to renew. We don't use it, and so we sold that per board direction for $14,000, and that included a sale fee to QHS of 10%. So we still cleared $12,000 plus. Facility planning for summer of 2022. Sally and I have started working with Consolidated Construction, looking at timelines and plans of action related to summer projects of 2022, just the volume based on what we're planning and we've preliminarily outlined to do. There's just going to be a lot more work to do, so that means we're going to have to start having conversations about summer projects now, when we normally would wait until the spring, because they're going to be big projects that we, again, have preliminarily looked at. Focus on HVAC at Gustner in the middle school, window replacement at the middle school, the addition that we've talked about for a couple of years now at Jamestown High School, health and wellness. We have roofing needs across the district. So with those really pretty comprehensive large projects, we need to start looking now at design costs, bidding. Those are things we need to start early. And so we need to look at summer projects earlier than we would in a typical year. And so the facilities committee, we've had conversations about when we might be able to have a meeting in the near future. It probably won't be till after the 20th. But we need to look at getting that in front of the board as soon as we can to finalize those projects, so we can engage with design team to develop the scope of project so we can bid it out. So questions about that? Okay. And later on in the agenda, I'm not going to steal Mr. Gaylor or Mr. Heinert's thunder. They're going to be talking about career and tech ed enhancements. I heard the presentation, or at least, I heard the presentation earlier today at JSTC. An excellent presentation I'm sure that you'll enjoy, talking about what our CTE programs currently are doing, potentials for expansion. There's a lot of great opportunities out there, and I do think it's important to reference that this was part of the preliminary approval that we did back in May. This is the $500,000 that is part of a match grant through the state, so matching dollar for dollar. So that $500,000 becomes $1 million. With other funding sources that we can find, Perkins or other support, community support, that again doubles dollar for dollar. So if you want to find a long-term bang for your buck, this program is a great way to enhance an area that we know that we want to continue to enhance in CTE, but long-term benefit, I don't know how you get better than a dollar for dollar match. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Jason?
I noticed in the personnel hire forms that rightfully so, we're paying a couple individuals to do some lunch duty at the high school. Do we see a need for that at any other level?
We have at the middle school, but outside of that, we have not. It's just based on size and responsibility, time. So we have not at this time.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to item D, which is Board Education. We have number 1, the educational competency, local taxation.
Everybody's favorite topic. I can see the eyes glaze over already. And I'm going to apologize to Dan because he heard this in orientation already last meeting. But I want to provide, I think it's really important that we continue to educate not only the board but also the public on local taxation so we can understand how the local side feeds into our total budget and how we come up with those amounts. So the learning targets, because I'm a teacher at heart, we're going to define elements of funding, local funding, mill levies, and calculate taxable value, mill rates, and recognize the growth cap and how it impacts our ability to tax locally. So there are 4 types of taxable value. There's residential, commercial, what we call centrally assessed, and then agricultural. So if you look at the first 3, residential, commercial, and centrally assessed properties, that's all based on market value. Agricultural land is different. That's based on production. And it becomes a little bit more challenging too because that's done on a 10-year rolling average. You take out the high production year, you take out the low production year, and so you're averaging the 8 remaining years. And that's how the taxable valuation is determined at the agricultural level. So market value for most, residential, commercial, centrally assessed, and then agricultural based on that 10-year rolling average throughout the high, throughout the low year. So this is the process that if you're determining local taxable value on your home, for example, or any property that you would use, the market value is where you start. You take your market value, you cut it in half to find the assessed value. So market value, I know my home is worth $400,000. I take it in half, assessed value. Assessed value is multiplied by either 9% or 10%. It depends on the type of property it is, commercial, residential, or agricultural. And then you get your property tax, or that individual property taxable value. So the example that I show in the slideshow is home sells for $100,000. Its assessed value is $50,000. It's a residential property. It's multiplied by 9%, and then it receives its taxable value of $4,500. So when we look at our taxable value in our school district, it's going to be obviously a lot higher than that, $78 million. Okay, that's the compilation of all of these individual properties, whether they be centrally assessed, residential, commercial, agricultural. All of these individual taxable values are added together to get the district's taxable value. Okay, so it starts with each individual property, but it builds to the district's taxable value. So it is important to note that one of the things that I think it's important for school board members to note is that taxable value when our budgets are finalized, we know that we have a budget hearing and we have to do that before October 10th because that's when we do a final budget, or no later than October 10th. Taxable value is only preliminary at that time. Those aren't finalized until later in the year. And so we're operating with the best number that we have. It's always very close. Our auditors do a great job. They really do. They're operating with a different timeline than what we have. And we can say, well, that should be the same, and I would agree with that, but it isn't. And so we operate with the best numbers that we have by October 10th. And like I said, our auditors do a great job, and it's not an auditor issue, it's just the way the system is. But we get close, but we don't have final numbers, so we have to account for that when we approve our budgets, and we make our mill levy requests. So I will ask you to look at this a little bit, and if, I'm not presenting here, it would go on an animation. But. So you can practice a little bit. So if your taxable value of your home has a market value of $275,000, what's your taxable value? So now you can practice. Again, I'm a teacher at heart. I'm going to make you apply. You can use a calculator. You can even ask your friend. Yep. So just think about what the steps are. You want to find your assessed value first and recognize what kind of property is next to determine the taxable value. And again, remember this is when you're talking the school district's taxable value, that's adding up all the individual properties into a collective taxable value. So step one, you find the taxable value. You take that $275,000 times 50%. So that's $137,500 is the assessed value. It's a residential property. So it's either going to be 9 or 10%. It's a residential property. So it's 9%. So taxable value is $12,375. Is the taxable value to that property.
What's the difference in the 9 or 10%?
Just depends on what property, if it's agricultural.
Okay.
Yeah. Commercial. So if we know what taxable value and how to calculate taxable value, now we need to think about a mill. And we talk about mills, but do we, we all see our property tax statements and they have how many mills we're requesting. But if we know how we calculate taxable value, this is how many mills, of course, is an important part of understanding what that taxation impact is. So a mill is essentially 1/10 of a penny. So that means that it generates revenue equivalent to 0.001 of the taxable value. So the easiest way when we talk about your total taxable value, which is a large number, just move your decimal point over 3 spots. So if your taxable value, if your school district is 50 million, you're going to know that each mill is going to generate 50,000. So you take the total mill levy times 50,000 in this instance, and you'd find out what the school district is receiving in terms of local revenue. So again, easiest way, we get that big number, 78 million, 65 million. Just move it over 3 spots, and then you see what that mill generates.
Did you say
$78,250 something. Yeah. Yep. So you will have that. I mean, that'll be when we do our budget hearing. When we finalize our budget, we'll have that number directly. But, for now, about 78,000 a mill. And we know that also, again, that's not finalized even at that point. So it'll change a little bit between even now and likely October 10th. So the mill is basically the mechanism to determine how much you're requesting. And so there's limits at every level. You can only levy to so much in certain funds, general fund, building fund. Some you need board action to request, and I'm going to walk through what each of those are. Another quick check. So if you have a taxable value of 15 million and you wish to increase 5 mills in your miscellaneous levy, how much new revenue is this going to generate for your district? So easiest way to move those 3 decimal places over to find out what 1 mill generates, take that amount times the number of mills that you're actually increasing or decreasing, depending on what the issue is. But so you're going to take 15 million, and you know that each mill is equivalent to $15,000. Take it times 5, so it's 45,000. So I'm sorry about that. 75,000. Okay? Oh, I thought I had that wrong. So 75,000. So if you look at school district levies, what different levies you can levy in, the one we all think about, of course, is the general fund, because that's the largest fund. So you have a limit of 70 mills. So I call those first 60 mills almost like a state levy, because if you remember our state funding, and we'll talk about that at a future meeting and future education, but we are deducted the value of 60 mills from our state funding, and it's an equity measure. It's to make sure that school districts across the state are treated equitably, that they're treated fairly. And so one of the ways that happens is almost a redistribution of that local revenue, because not every school district has the same property. You know, you might go out west and there are some pretty big energy production taxes or impacts to property. You might go out east and there's a lot of economic development. You might go into a very rural area and it's a little bit more poverty stricken. So all of our districts are different. And so what the funding formula does is it reintegrates 60 mills, or the vast majority of what we levy. Because of that, it's almost like a state levy. That 60 mills, that's almost like a forced deduct. And it's not forced, we're not required to do it, it's just disincentivized, or incentivized to do it. If we were to not levy 60 mills, the state would deduct the value of 60 mills from our state funding. So I couldn't advocate that you do that. The other 10 mills are what are called board discretionary levy. It's lumped in historically to the general fund. So you do have, so while you levy 70 mills, 60 of it is redistributed, and so you get less state aid for those 60 mills. The 10 remaining mills, those would flow into your general fund, and you'd receive the value of that. And you can do that without a vote. That is simply board action. So it's a vote of the board as the entity designed to make that decision. The second is the miscellaneous fund levy. The history of the miscellaneous fund. School districts used to have authority to go out and request a lot of different levies from the public. Transportation, asbestos, technology were all examples of different levies that you could go out to the public and request. And if they approved it, then you'd have levy authority. None of those had levy authority of greater than 5. So what the state did when the new funding formula was created is they combined all of these. And they said, why are we doing this? Why are we asking schools to go out and do this? And they're getting approval because their public knows that they need technology, or they need to address asbestos or transportation. Why don't we just include them all? And we'll make it 12. But then we eliminate this other levy authority. So now you don't go back unless it's a general fund request. You could ask the public to increase your general fund with a special election. But in the miscellaneous fund, they just combined them all and said, let's get rid of all these little piddly levies. And now you have authority to go up to 12. Now, there isn't any limits. You could go from 0 to 12 to 4 to 1, back to 11. You can do that in a year. In the general fund, you can't. You have some limits on 12% in dollars. So you can't go up more than 12% in dollars every year. That's the only one that has a limit like that, is the general fund. Miscellaneous, they aren't subject to the 12%. So only the general fund. Special reserve levy, you can levy up to 3 mills per year in the special reserve fund. And by the vote of the board, you can transfer those dollars into the general fund. There are limitations to that. But it cannot have a value greater than 15 mills. So you take your 15 times your taxable value, and that would be the limit that you can have in a special reserve. Now, Jamestown does have a special reserve fund. We have not levied into it for a number of years, but there is a fund with a dollar amount. You approve that as part of your budget every year. And we aren't anywhere close to the value of 15 mills. Special assessments. You may establish a special assessment levy, which we have historically, because we're assigned special assessments to pay for, in our case, city specials. Infrastructure, like paving streets, the work we've done out at the middle school, for example, the parking lot at the high school a few years ago. Those are all come back to us in specials. We get the best pricing that way when we go through with the city. They special it back out to us. And so this year, in the past, it's been anywhere from 1 to 3. Well, it's been from 0 to 3. But in recent years, it's mostly been 1. We're recommending, at least the budget you approved in July was to increase that to 3. We can't request in the special assessment levy more than what we're assessed. So if we're asking for 3, that means we have the value of 3 in special assessments. The building fund levy, that is one that requires voter approval. It can't be any higher than 20 mills. The school district at Jamestown, our patrons have given us authority to be at 10. And now this fund occurs in perpetuity. So meaning if you have been given authority in 1936 to be at 10 mills, then you're at 10 mills in perpetuity. If you've been given authority to 20, then you have levy authority to 20. So you could always make that request back to the community to increase that, or it could be brought up to decrease that amount, but that requires 60% to make that change. Sinking in interest, that is where you would pay for principal, premium, and interest payments for construction, purchase, or remodel of a facility. That's again 60%, which I think the board is aware. One thing that I put in this presentation that I think is important for board members to know and also the public is that we're required to levy 110% of the dollars needed to make the principal and interest payment. That's because you may have a discount. Counties have a discount if you pay taxes early, or you may have a discount if you pay taxes early, and not everybody pays their taxes on time. So you have that responsibility then for that payment. So that's why you're required to do 110% rather than 100%. We get that question when we have levy requests and referendums. Well, why is this amount higher than what you anticipated, or what is in your request? And that's why, because we're required to be at 110%. So what happens with that money then? That's the second question. I know some board members are aware of this because we've done it. After a certain period of time, 2 years, 3 years, after the completion of the project, after the bond has been paid off, 3 years, you're required to transfer it back to the general fund. So that's what happens with that remaining 10%. You collect it, and after 3 years, it's required by law to be transferred back to your general fund. The tuition levy, districts are able to levy the value that it pays for tuition for high school students. It's a high school tuition levy. Being educated in another district, and that does include residential placement, which we know has continued to escalate over the years. Even 10, 15 years ago, the number of students requiring residential placement was much, much lower than it is now. And so we do see escalating tuition levy or tuition costs. This is a levy that Jamestown has levied historically at 7 mills. That doesn't cover the costs that we have, but it is that's been one variable that we've looked at as a district, and we know that we need to continue that. But we also know that our levy amount is already high. And so that isn't an area that we've increased, although you certainly would be able to as a board if you felt that was appropriate. The last is a safety levy. I talked in the miscellaneous levy about how the legislature wanted to eliminate all those little piddly levies, that we added one back called the safety levy. It's a different levy. I was very supportive of this when it came across the legislature. I think it's a great plan. It is not a perpetual levy, which makes it different than these other levies, or than some of the other levies. It's not perpetual, and it only requires 50% voter authority. Essentially what you would do is you would create a safety plan, you would present it to the public, and you could levy up to 5 mills. And if 50% approve, then you would have that safety levy for that period of time. And then after 5 years, you'd have to go back to the public again if you wanted to continue it. For example, if you wanted a school resource officer in a district, if a district didn't have one, you could fund it through the safety plan, but every 5 years you'd have to come back to the public and say, this worked so well that we want to continue. Or you could fund other safety enhancements throughout the district and continue to every 5 years, or just end it after 5 years, or maybe it lasts 15 years. But you would have that option after every 5-year span. So I'm just going to pause if there's questions on the different levies. So here's what a school district calculation might look like. 60 mills in the general, that is again what I would consider the minimum levy that you would have in the general fund, unless you are a district that has outstripped taxable value growth, then you have to levy less, but that's a conversation for a different time. Times that 50 million, or that 50,000, times your taxable value. In this example, a miscellaneous levy, we're at 12. In this fictitious example, it's 5.15. A building fund at 10, that's what we're at, 10 mills. And in this fictitious district, there's a sinking interest fund levy as well. So in that case, 92.65 mills, you take it times 50,000, and that gets the 4.6 million of the local taxation. One thing that is important to note that I referenced before is the 12% growth cap. So again, you have in dollars levied, you can't request more than 12% more than you did the previous year in dollars. We think about in mills, but we're talking about in dollars. When we levy in dollars. They're calculated in mills, but we have to think in terms of dollars. That's what makes some of this a little bit challenging in the general fund, because in Jamestown we levy 70 mills in our general fund. That means 60 of them are deducted at the state for our state funding. In some districts, because of that 12% growth, especially those that have seen escalating taxable value, think about the West. If they levy, or if their taxable value grows by more than 12%, they have to go backwards in terms of their general fund. They have to, because they can only go 12% in dollars. So if they're increasing in their taxable value and consistently, and then going backwards, what you've seen is some districts levy in the general fund as low as like 38 mills. We levy 70, they have to levy 38. They can't levy more than that. And that's because of the 12% growth cap. It does create some inequities in state funding, which means that some schools are only levying, or are only being deducted, say, 38 mills. In Jamestown, we're being deducted the value of 60 mills. So that's an inequity that's being addressed legislatively, but it's something that's going to take time. And I think if we could all go back in time, we would change it. If we could, I don't think anybody foresaw the level of taxable value growth that they saw out west when these changes were originally made. It's not an indictment on our legislators. They did a good job. The formula is a good formula. But this was a problem that we now have to address, because some school districts don't. That creates taxpayer inequity between energy counties and those of us that are not in an energy county. And I would say, as I said before, it's a disincentive to levy purposefully below 60 mills, because you're going to be deducted the value of 60 mills. So why would you do it? Now, we aren't in that position, but who knows, we may be at some point, and it's important that people know that we're deducted that value of 60 mills regardless. So I did include some, in the presentation, some laws associated with taxation and levies, the estimated property tax and hearing notice. That includes a budget hearing that we're going to have at our next meeting. School district tax levies, which is the codified version of this, slides 8 and 9. And then levies, which is that as well. So this is not applicable to Jamestown Public, but I think it's important for board members to know as well. Century Code allows us to keep a general fund expenditures of 35%, or I'm sorry, an ending fund balance of 35% of our previous year's actual expenditures in the general fund. That's what we're allowed, plus 50,000. That's what we're allowed to keep as an interim balance. We're around 13%. The board established an eventual target wanting to be around 15%. This is important to know right now because we're getting a big influx of dollars through ESSER. So legislatively, they made a reprieve. And so now we don't have that 35%, even though it's not applicable to us in Jamestown anyway. Any large district it's not applicable to because you aren't going to get anywhere close to 35%. But if you're a mid-level school, a Carrington, a Beulah, those types of schools, they get close to that 35% because they're big enough to need to carry over enough balance for multiple buildings, but they don't have the overall budget to accommodate at a lower percentage. So no large school is going to keep 35%. It just isn't realistic. It's far more money than the board would ever want to keep. So it isn't applicable to us, but it is important to note because it does impact schools smaller than us. And I think it's something we should continue to support, actually increasing not the 35%, but the flat dollar amount after, because that dollar amount really makes a difference to our smaller districts that have smaller expenditure budgets, but they have contingency costs that they need to consider. When a boiler goes out, for example, in your school district in Grenora and you have a $3 million budget, well, 35% of a $3 million budget may not cover all of your costs and allow you to cash flow your district. So you need to have a greater ending fund balance than the 35%. That flat dollar amount is what really matters to them. But questions? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And I think, we've had that before, and I think every time you go through it, I learn something new. So that's really good information. Thank you for that. Now we move on to item E, old business. I don't believe we have any. Item F, new business. 1, activities. We don't have anything new there. Buildings and grounds, nothing new there. But item 3, curriculum, assessment, and instruction. Item A is the Career and Technology Center update. Mr. Gaylor.
And Mr. Heinrich.
And Mr. Heinrich.
As they come up, I will say that I listened to their presentation earlier today at JSDC, and they did a great job. The bar is high now, fellas. It's going to be hard to, yeah. You guys did a great job, and I think the board will appreciate the presentation that focuses on what programs we have right now and the impact it has on kids, and then moving forward with ESSER funding and that dollar-for-dollar match of how we can really maximize impact in our district. We've talked about ESSER before, how we have short-term needs, but we really need to be thinking generationally, with these generational dollars long-term, and these are great proposals of how we can do that.
Thank you, Greg, for the introduction, and we're pretty excited about this opportunity. We were reflecting with JSDC earlier today that our CTC is getting a little bit of a facelift, a much-needed facelift with the painting and some patching on it. And Mr. Heinrich's been, is this on? Oh, I think it probably timed out. It was on to start. Not that your presentation was too long or anything. That's it. Is that, okay, great. Okay, so we were talking about that, and Mr. Heinrich reminds me often that they built our building around Kevin Kubat, who started in 1979, and so we're talking about 40 plus years since that building has been built. It's served a lot of different purposes. It's been adapted to new programs and changing programs over time. And the legislature authorized these matching dollars, which are repurposed coronavirus relief dollars that flowed through the state and now went to the state CTE department to the tune of $70 million available across the state. And that's a significant investment from our legislators and governor and the state CTE department that fought for that level of funding. And we see this as a generational opportunity, really. to think about, what are our needs currently and hopefully planning for the future in a plan that's right-sized for us. So that's kind of what we put together. We want to start off talking about what exists. I know a lot of you have been at the CTC, and we did some tours there last spring, but any of you are welcome anytime to come up there, and Mr. Heinert will give you the dime tour. But we'll have him talk about what CTE is, just a little background for those of you who don't know, and what some of our programs are.
Okay, so our program aligns with occupational needs of our state and region. And so every 2 years, we produce a local comprehensive needs assessment. And basically, that's our way of showing our state that the programming that we offer, all right, actually aligns with the needs of not only Jamestown, but our regional area. And so we do that every 2 years now. That is actually something new that's come about from Perkins 5. And so we'll be doing that study again this spring. But in terms of the results of the last report, it directly showed that, yes, the programming that we offer right now is of great need. So that was refreshing to see. As you walk the hallways of James Valley, you're going to see 3 numbers, 1, 2, 7, and they are significant. That reflects occupational demands, occupational needs. So right now in America, in jobs of the top 10 jobs of greatest demand, only 1 out of 10 require a degree higher than a master's degree. 2 out of 10 require a 4 years degree or higher. And 7 out of 10 require a 2-year degree or less, all right? And actually, if you look locally, that story is true for Jamestown, all right? And so we talk to our students about that. We preach that as a staff. It's something we live by. CTE is a little bit different. We're learning by doing. We're hands-on. So when you were a kid at home, and if you were changing oil with your dad or running an axe or splitting firewood, something like that, it's much of the same concept. I'm guessing your parents didn't have a how-to manual for that, all right? Now, a lot of our education is based on philosophy, so there is quite a bit of research and study that goes into that, but a lot of our lab experiences are hands-on. So anytime you walk in any of our areas for those labs, it's going to be hands-on learning. So that's the neat thing about CTE. We do offer certifications in our Career and Tech Center. They come in the form of ASE and CNA. Okay. We offer CTSO experiences like Skills USA and FFA as well. And we rely heavily on community advisories. So our advisory boards meet twice a year, and we look at that experience. And after those meetings, we actually meet with our staff and say, hey, what did you learn? And basically, they're working with people of those boards and asking, what is it that we're doing well, and where can we grow? Because we're always looking for those areas, and that's actually helped us a great deal to grow as a center. Did I skip a slide? So.
One of the things that that's good. One of the things that we look at as well are pathways that are available to our students. So do we have 2 credits or more in a pathway available to students? So these are the current pathways that we're supporting both through some of our JHS courses as well as JVCTC courses. And we have a number of students that qualify for the CTE scholarship. There's an additional scholarship opportunity. I'm sure we'll have some board education on the Choice Ready Scholarship in the future as well. But for our current 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, they have the Academic State Scholarship, or CTE, and this is just a assembly of those. That's not all of the courses we offer, but all of them that have a pathway that supports them.
So one of those areas is health careers, all right? And so in that program, we offer the class health careers, intro to health careers. We offer nursing assistants. We offer medical terminology. That's a dual credit opportunity for our kids. And that's also a part of our RN fast track. So basically, we were the first career and tech center in the state to offer that fast track. So our students can leave our center. They can enter a 2-year school and actually become an RN by age 20. They can do it now in 2 years. Yes?
Is the center still a CNA testing site?
Yes. We offer those typically, well, our students will test this fall. We have offered in the past based on demand. We work with NDSCS on that. They approach us. We try to set up a date that works for everybody involved. The demand for CNAs right now is enormous. Some people ask, why did we create the RN pathway? And actually, it goes bigger than that. That pathway is also an area of need for physical therapists, occupational therapists, and so they can finish those programs early just by taking all those dual credit opportunities. through our center. So it's really a neat document. Right now in Jamestown, we have 97 unfilled RN positions, and it's a little bit misleading because we have travel nurses filling many of those spots. All right, and so it's been an enormous strain on all medical professionals. So we're doing our best to help that out, and we believe that pathway is one of the quickest ways we can make a difference. So another area of interest for us is childcare. We offer that program for grades 9 through 12, just like health careers. All right, we have co-op learning opportunities right now, and we have 6 students placed, I believe, just who are second-year child care students. All right, and they're placed within daycares throughout the community, and so they're actually contributing to that workforce right now, and they get credit for it. And so that's a neat way to do that. We have 59 students currently enrolled in that program. For ag, the JVCTC offers more agricultural experiences than any other program in the state. And so when you look at the programming that we have from Foundations of Ag to Ag Science 1, Ag Science 2, Small Animal Care, Intro to Vet Science, Intro to Food Science, Intro to Ag Science, Horticulture, Agricultural Co-op, our Blue Jay Acres project, it's quite the program. It really is. I had the opportunity to attend state FFA this summer, and it was one of the highlights of my summer. I was intrigued by those experiences. I had no idea that our students had those opportunities to participate in the CTSO like that. So it was really a powerful experience. This year we have 79 students enrolled in ag. So, yes.
For either those that are board members or maybe those listening in, talk about Blue Jay Acres and what that is. I'm not sure if everybody knows. I think it's a great, we talked about hands-on, but this is an innovative idea of what we're doing with Blue Jay Acres. I think we should talk about it.
It is new and innovative for sure. Mr. Gaylor actually came to me with this idea during my first year as assistant director, and he said, what do you think of maybe putting some land into production? And I'd never heard of a school doing that before. And so we put 25 acres into production for corn and beans. Our students were actually part of the planning process. They helped out map the land in terms of how much we're going to plant in each area. They now participate in the marketing end of it, so they're studying trends in terms of when's the best time to sell corn, when's the best time to sell beans. They look at that, they look at their production numbers, and they try to determine, boy, why did we get the yields that we had? And so it's been a neat experience. It was cut back to 22 acres? What is that, 20?
I think we're closer to 18 now.
18?
The Erstad field took a little of that space.
Right. Yeah, but still a neat experience for them. So a bit of a drought year this year. I don't think we'll have near the production that we had last year. July was hard on us, so hopefully we'll get something out of that experience this year.
I think it's great right there on campus.
Yeah.
It's
Who cares for it in the summer? The summer school students?
In the summertime?
So it's
Yeah.
become sort of a community project. The local soil conservation, they're the group that helps us with planting, and Senex, Darren Lucina. Those are actually plots where they're testing different varieties. And so they help with some of the chemical applications as they're needed. And then our local extension services also use that as a training ground, which was particularly useful when we had an area where we removed some snow and they needed to do weed identification, and all the grass was gone and the weeds had come up. They could find all of the weeds they needed to in that area. So
For Auto Tech right now, our program is literally busting at the seams. So we have 18 students enrolled in our first Auto Tech block. We had 17 enrolled in our second block. Those numbers will be coming down a little bit. We just had 3 agreements this afternoon for co-op opportunities for those students. So for those second year students who are part of that 2-year block program, they now will be working with some cooperating agencies within our own community and get those hands-on experiences there. I was really intrigued by that, by the level of support from our community. It speaks volumes for Jamestown. I'm grateful that our students will be able to have those experiences. They'll be working next to ASE certified mechanics in various shops from our area. So it's something that I hope we can continue to grow, especially if our numbers get that big. Yes?
example of that, are those placement opportunities leading to potential college reimbursement and then placement back in Jamestown?
In some cases, yes. One of the agencies we reached an agreement with today has sponsored our students in the past. Sponsorships are great, and many times co-ops lead to that. I tell students all the time, hey, by this you're really in a testing ground, okay? And so if they really like you, if you actually work and if you take an interest in this and if you become responsible and you had a great positive experience, that company may take a chance on you. So that can lead to a scholarship opportunity. So and scholarships vary. Sometimes there's costs up front by the student. Sometimes that company will forward the cost right up front. They'll bear that cost and help that kid get through right away. So it just depends on the program. But yes, that is maybe one of the greatest selling points of a co-op opportunity of the doorways that can open down the road. So there's that ASE certification that they'll take their senior year, so they do a pre-test and a post-test at the beginning, all right? So we have our pre-test actually coming up soon, and then they will post-test right around the beginning of May for that. So our current enrollment in that program is 68. A big part of that is our students that have joined from Pingree and Buchanan and Montpelier. Our numbers grew there as well, too. So it's neat. Our numbers, when we started 2 years ago with this, when we started looking at our numbers for our local comprehensive needs assessment and how many kids we have enrolled, they have definitely grown, that's for sure. And so it's great to see that we have that many kids interested in this area. Automotive collision, again, that's a 9-12 program. Students can participate as early as foundation, all right? And so they're in our small engines class, our foundations automotive class, so they learn about some concepts there. It's there where Mr. Kubat introduces them to automotive collision if that's a pathway they'd like to pursue for their junior, senior year. Okay. Again, they have ASE certification for that. We currently have 28 students enrolled. Last year, we completed a full body restoration on a 2007 Ford, I believe. It was a crew cab. And so from bumper to bumper, they tore into every fender, every door, and they were able to do a complete restoration with that vehicle. So that was pretty powerful to see. We have other experiences that we take on as well. We've remodeled or restored golf carts, things of that nature. And so it's kind of neat because not only do our students get to work with metal, but they get to work with fiberglass and plastic and learn various applications for that. So it's neat to see that we're still supporting that area. Precision machining, we actually are very fortunate to have a relationship with Collins Aerospace. Our instructor works there. He's amazing. He works a night shift, and then he grabs a couple hours of sleep, and he reports to our center by 10 o'clock, and he's teaching our students precision machining 1 and 2. Our program has grown immensely. We kind of giggle about this. We had a 600% growth because we had one student the year before. So it's neat to see that program area is growing. We very much appreciate having Collins as a part of that relationship. They have been not only supportive in the instructor, but if there's a piece of equipment that we need or a tool that we need, they find a way to make it happen. And the neat thing about it, too, is they deliver for us. I'm not sending a student out there. I don't have to send an instructor. They find a way to get it to us. And so it's been a wonderful relationship to have them a part of that. I'm really hoping down the road that we can bring their scholarship program back, and I anticipate that happen once we see greater trends in industry for that area. Building trades, as you see a picture of our lake cabin. That was our first lake cabin. We just completed that project last spring. And so we offer construction 2 and 3 for our upper level students and intro to construction for our freshman students. And trust me when I say our intro kids were eyeing that lake cabin the whole year. They understand that that's the prize. They get to work on something bigger at the end. We chose to go with lake cabins because the housing market was tight. Just 2 years ago from our local comprehensive needs assessment, there was one house being built in Jamestown. When I spoke to contractors from the area and asked about the demand for a workforce, they said, we don't have enough. And I asked, well, if you don't have enough, why aren't we building more, or why aren't we building more houses if you actually already have 2 crews going? And they said, no, you don't understand. We don't have enough to keep our remodeling crews going. He said, we would love to expand, but right now we have just enough people to basically fill 2 crews. And so is there a demand for that area? Yes. We're keeping up in terms of roofing, siding, windows. Jamestown's supporting that area relatively well. But in terms of new construction, it's definitely an area for us to grow. We discovered that more people could afford the lake cabins than the typical house, okay? And so that was the big draw for us there. This particular cabin is actually unique in that it has 2x6 walls. And when we compete with, when I hate to even say compete, but when you look at comparable cabins, all right, like similar to that model, many of them are 2x2 or 2x4 construction. So the R value of that cabin is much higher than you would see typically in market. We use name brand windows, so we work with a mid-coat window product. We're using high-end roofing materials, and so our students really get to work with the best of the best for that. It's been a unique project for them. Many kids took pride in that. I had a student show up last year on a Saturday and help Mr. Thorson. We were in a pinch to get some roofing in, and he volunteered to come in. Actually, two of them volunteered to come in and spend their own time for extra credit to actually wrap up the roofing part of that project. So no, it is something that they take a great pride in doing. All right, one of the neat parts of this particular industry I'd always love to use a pun is our aviation program just took flight. Okay, and so we now offer Aviation 1 and Aviation 2. Our instructor is Brad Stenglin. He comes from Bismarck Career Academy, and he actually serves some other communities as well. One thing that's unique about this program is we're the first career and tech program in the state to offer dual credit, and that evolved through a relationship through the University of Jamestown. Okay, and so they will be sending students to our school soon. They opted to create like a night class for this experience. All right, they're welcome to do a morning class in the future. We do have space for that. What they chose that option right now. We have 11 kids enrolled. They're already talking about drones because the plan is to add that to that area by next year. And so the neat thing about drones right now is there's a growing interest in drone racing. All right, and that's dictating a lot of the curriculum, that's driving a lot of the curriculum. So students are using 3D printers in this state to build their own drones, and then they drive to various cities to compete in races. And so I'm hoping our students will have those same opportunities. We visited with Dr. Leck. We do plan a tour very soon. We're waiting on our larger simulator to be delivered. All right, and once that's in place, by all means, we'll have you folks up for another tour, and you'll get to see that area. It's absolutely amazing. If you're dying to see it, let me know. I might be able to work in a quick private trip for you to take a look at that area. But no, it's really neat to see.
So in addition to the programs that are housed at JVCTC, we have some other programs that run through JVCTC, but are actually physically located in the high school. Family and Consumer Science is a high school, Jamestown High School program, technically. Marketing is a JVCTC program. Accounting, business, we have got a variety of business courses and 144 students in those this year. And then information technology, we have 7 students in this year. So over time, we've come to the board and requested new courses, things like AP Computer Science or cybersecurity or aviation, or changes in names to attract more students, like precision machining, which seems to be working 600%.
Yes.
Yeah. And we appreciate your support. We appreciate Dr. Leck's creativity in helping us get aviation off the ground. No pun intended there. That's these types of opportunities exist because of the relationships you guys have in the community as well. So if there are people that have ideas, typically it's hard to employ somebody full time, but that relationship with Collins, where we've got precision machining, wow, what a beautiful thing, and rewarding for the companies and the employees, I hope as well. So as Mr. Heinert, Doctor, I almost promoted you there. I talked about, we do a comprehensive needs assessment. That's every 2 years. Also, the first year that we took over JVCTC, we were under the 5-year vision process, which is another evaluation that the state comes and does. And out of that, we came with kind of a few areas to focus on, and that came from both our local comprehensive needs assessment and that state visioning process. And that's to expand and enhance health careers opportunities, 93, 97 RN positions locally, traveling nurses making anywhere from $63 to $100 an hour. There's definitely a need there. Creating pathways for tech and engineering and STEM, that we have a pathway that starts in middle school, but expanding those, and I would include aviation in that list of STEM opportunities for our students, the combined application of science, technology, engineering, and math, and what they're doing in that class definitely meets that. Enhancing programming for future agricultural needs, restoring our pathway for information technology, which we did with board support last year, and then increasing opportunities for what Mr. Heinert talked about, which is work-based learning. So work-based learning is kind of a newer term. It's similar to things that you've probably heard of before, or other things that we've already started or had in practice, but it's part of the new federal dialogue on Perkins 5, which is a major funding source for us for upgrading our equipment to industry standard. And so work-based learning opportunities, everything that you saw in those slides, from complete auto body restoration to building a cabin, those are what we'd call simulated work experiences. So we're creating that opportunity. Our students working on transition house and doing a remodel last year, in addition to building a cabin. Those are simulated work experiences that we've created and we facilitate. But in addition to that, we have an opportunity to expand into areas like job shadows. We've got internships at the high school, which an internship is a different category, because maybe a student didn't take that 2-year or 2-credit pathway and qualify for a co-op, but they still want to explore law enforcement or being a vet tech, or they want to explore being a physical therapist. That's why we have internships that exist to try to get that in their senior year. Apprenticeships we currently don't have. It's a little different maybe spin on an internship, and there are some programs for apprenticeships out there. And then, as Mr. Heinert said, we've got about 16 students currently placed in cooperative work experiences, which is a big increase from what we've done in the past, and it gets those students on site, builds relationships in the community, and honestly fills community needs as well with students who have been technically trained in our CTC. So when we look at that work-based learning, we look at the future trends and what we've seen in the last couple of years. We set some priorities based on that, and those priorities kind of included an expansion to our Career Tech Center, which is the whole purpose of why we're here tonight. This would be a picture of that expansion. And when we consider the expansion, we want to consider, just like we've talked about with other projects we might be working on, flexible multi-use space. How does this space get used now and then potentially in the future? We want it to be right-sized. Yes, there's $70 million in matching available at the state, but we want something that's right-sized for us that we can sustain from a staffing standpoint and from a facility standpoint. We want to include student experience if we can. With the transition house, we had a budget that we were able to stick to because we had students who did a lot of that work for us. They're continuing to do that work, putting some windows in the next couple of weeks. We see this as a similar opportunity for our students to include them. We wanted to prioritize access and equity for special populations. We have some facilities where they're not accessible, and we wanted to make sure that we prioritize that. And community partnerships, we presented to to Economic Development, JSDC, today. We wanted to connect with some of their future projects, as well as to talk about what their current needs are. And then we wanted to make sure that whatever we were putting together had some cost stability to it in what's a pretty unstable cost world right now. And so one of the areas that we've explored, haven't committed to, is what's called a GSA, or a government service agreement schedule. And basically what that is looking at maybe costing out that expansion through a GSA, which is able to access federal, it meets federal requirements and you get federal volume discount pricing on that. So it's a new process. Instead of using an architect and a construction management group, they do the designing and the building, especially for these pre-engineered buildings, which is what we'd be looking at for that structure. So there's a potential to have a significant cost savings on that. And if that's something that we, consider in the long run, it'll have to meet that budget, I guess, is how I could describe that. So this is part of the drawing with that group that we're working with on getting a rough order of magnitude for our expansion. Our expansion really is to free up space to have kind of a domino effect across the building, as well as to meet some community needs. So we've got two spaces here essentially. One is for building trades, and that is to try to incentivize. We've got around 40 students in the program now. We'll have additional students, new students that will come on in the spring semester as well into that program. One of our limitations with starting class at 7:50 or 8 o'clock and working on a cabin, for example, is that certain times of the year the sun's not quite up. If it's up, it's not up very high, and we're dealing with sub-zero temperatures. We've got students who are inexperienced at this, although they've got some good training and safety training, and we're putting in the elements of ice and snow and rain. And so the goal would be not necessarily to have a heated space, but an insulated space that could remove some of those elements from the construction. We hope that it could speed up the construction time as well because of that, and increase safety for students, and increase the number of students that are interested in that. Students don't exactly dress for an outdoor construction day when they come to high school. They get used to it, they plan accordingly, but it would definitely help with recruiting, I think, in that area. In addition, you can see one of the things that we've identified as a community need, and in our local comprehensive needs assessment, was that we can expand our health careers opportunities and benefit our community. And one of the things that's been identified as a need for a substation on the northeast part of Jamestown. So that kind of evolved into a lot of discussion with emergency training associates and Ringdahl Ambulance for what we're looking at as an EMS partnership, emergency medical services, to have on site a substation, but then they also do regional level trainings for EMS personnel. We know that that's a need not just in our community but surrounding communities as well, for where those stations are located. And they said that it was in a newspaper article, I think probably 2 or 3 years ago when we started these initial conversations, that there's a need based on call volume for the northeast part of Jamestown. And that's just, it is what it is. That's what the data indicates to them. And, having experienced calling an ambulance to the high school a few times, minutes can make a difference, or at least when you're waiting for an ambulance, minutes really make a difference. And so I think it is an important consideration to look at that community need. This is also a creative, opportunity, I think, to leverage some staff that are there on site to be able to provide that training opportunity of EMS, or EMR is the other one. EMR is just a lower level. EMS is a higher level of training that students could get. So long term, be a great partnership, I think, with something that we're working on in design phase, and then also what does that long term lease and memorandum of understanding for providing those training opportunities for our students look like. Yes.
You could maybe share a little bit about, you referenced a lease agreement, so a space like that, there would be some in-kind contribution to the district in terms of training, providing instructor, but there's also potential for revenue generation in terms of a lease agreement for that additional EMS space.
Yeah, so at least conceptually, we've talked about the two different spaces. There's really two different entities. Emergency Training Associates provides that regional training. And so you see the classroom and bathroom and ambulance training area space on there. And then the rest of the space is ambulance bays, storage. They have bedrooms because they work in 24-hour shifts, and kind of a kitchenette, area, shower and bathroom access and laundry are the basic components of that substation. So, splitting those square footages out and then working to an agreement on that is kind of how we'd work on that partnership. But wait, we're not done yet. We've got, many of you were on the board when we started discussions about our transition program, and thank you for your support in making that happen. If you haven't been up to see that new location, it's phenomenal, and they continue to do the work on that. Part of the space we set aside in that original design process for a future commercial kitchen. And now, potentially that's something that's within reach based on the funding opportunities that we have. We see that commercial kitchen as not only a space that can be used by transition house students to, potentially do catering or prepare, a few meals for patrons from the community, but also as a space that could be used to do some culinary arts work. If you haven't been through our egg program, the kitchen space is small, especially for the numbers of students that we have that have interest in those programs. And if you're preparing, food for commercial sales, it has to be an inspectable level of kitchen. That's something we learned as well. And so if Amy and the transition program were to be selling something, or maybe a community member wanted to do a value-added product and say turn their raspberries into jelly that they could sell commercially, but they can't afford their own commercial kitchen, it could produce future rentals. We also see that as an opportunity to add, either through an ag program or through FACS program, that focus on culinary arts, which we know is also in our comprehensive needs assessment, a huge area of need for chefs and cooks within the community and region. We want to tie that concept in and address another need that we have, which is greenhouse space. Mr. Heinert does a great job of tours in CTC and showing people around our current greenhouse. There's not a lot of room to move around in there. It's not an accessible space. So what we'd propose would be a new greenhouse space that would be located right next to Transition House, and kind of reinforce that farm to table concept, I guess. They could raise produce there that they then use in meal preparation. I know that transition program would be excited about caring for that space, and our horticulture certainly could use an accessible lab space, and provide some additional opportunities for kids in our community. If there were, which we don't anticipate, but that's a picture of the Ag Innovation Center that's in Wapaton. I think the greenhouse might be from the Devil's Lake area as well. Oh, that one is, okay, so that one's paired with the, but we do have some mock-ups of that, as well as, some preliminary costs. All of that, the expansion would free up essentially one of our bays that we have currently dedicated to some maintenance things. We anticipate that that could potentially move into that building trades area because it's a larger space and we could wall off a space for maintenance and storage of some of that equipment in there. And then that would free up an area next to our precision machining that could be in the future maybe focused on energy education or maybe focused on IT or robotics or automation or some of those STEM or engineering and technology areas that we know we need to grow in. Freeing up that space creates that opportunity in the future. That's something that, we see other funding opportunities in the future to get that done, but we did want to include that in our list of priorities. How does it all shake out? This is a budget slide that we used when we were talking to JSDC today. So currently allocated, thank you to the board for your support with that, is $500,000 from JPS, and then $50,000 that we have at JVCTC that we would apply towards that. So that with the assuming our proposal is approved at the state level, that would be a match for 1.1 million. And we approached JSDC to look at that gap of 263,000. So half of that would be 131,500. That committee looked at that today, and then their full board will consider that next Monday as well. So we're excited about the potential of that. We got a lot of positive feedback from them. It is a proposal that I think makes sense. These are costs that we've through that GSA process and through researching and getting designs for the commercial kitchen and through some other research on those other expenses, we feel like those costs are within reach for us. If something were to come back differently, we'd just have to prioritize our list, I would imagine, or seek enhanced funding for that. So Dr. Leck talked about partnerships. That really is, I think, some of the bread and butter of CTE, because they have advisory committees for each of our programs. They have networks of people in the community that do that work. And we really do look for those partnerships to enhance what we do. We feel like this makes a lot of sense, and glad things are coming together on, and hopefully we'll stay on track with that. And CTE is learning that works and ties directly to our strategic plan. One of our vision statements that I pulled out of there is that we provide authentic experiences that integrate with the community for meaningful learning. And I can't think of a better example than some of what we've talked about here, as well as what's going on in other areas in the district. But thank you, and stand for any questions.
Well, most of you know that nothing gets me more excited about education than CTE. And this is all phenomenal, and I don't see a limit as to the possibilities with these relationships. Going back to, say, the current programs, the Blue Jay Acres, I just think that our CTE and our programs that we're building are one of the best kept secrets of our district and our community. And I'm not saying I have the answer, but that, I think we need to showcase these things a lot more than we have. And I just thought, the Blue Jay Acres, can we work on some signage, I had no idea even that the extension was doing those things up there and whatnot. And that's all things that we should be focused on. Marketing's not the right word, but anyway, between the transition house and things like CTE, these are the things that makes our district what it is. And I guess I'm just throwing out there that a lot of times in education we don't want to toot our own horn with things, but I just think this is one of it's just so exciting to see the Career Tech Center it could almost become a vital part of the community with what you're planning. So I commend you, and I would just, I spread the word whenever I can about CTE, but more signage and whatnot, Blue Jay Acres. Anyway, it's just my thing about how this really can take off, and I just want our community to know about it.
Any other questions, Diane?
Well, it was just absolutely fabulous to hear your presentation. Thank you so much. I think that the 127 analogy is something that a school board member should have in their back pocket because I hadn't heard it put so succinctly. But my understanding is the 127 represents the percentage, and the kids that are, or the students that are coming out of CTE would be students that are represented by that 2, or excuse me, by that 7, but are they getting what we would call 2 years of education beyond what they got in high school? I know that's a very, the public needs to know this too. It's a very elementary question, but help me with that statistic.
Many of our students do move on to the 2-year pathway, but that's not always the case. You know, when we're talking physical therapy, occupational therapy, the health careers, those will be numbers that we'll have to trend or watch because we just created the pathway. And so in a few years, it'll be interesting to see how many of our RNs actually chose the 2-year pathway versus the 4-year. I have a tough time promoting one over the other. All right. I offer it to them and say, hey, if this is what's best for you, then pursue it. The thing that makes it so attractive is the fact that they're no longer climbing into debt. All right. They're climbing out of debt. All right, and they're already contributing to the workforce. And so that's what makes that such an attractive component for us. There's one thing I did leave out too. There are many programs right now, for example, like Wind Energy and Lake Region State College. Many of their students are actually just grabbing a 1-year certificate. They're not completing the 2-year pathway, and they don't need to. They're making $70,000 after 1 year of education at Lake Region, and they're hopping right into industry. There's sign-on bonuses there. And so, and by the way, that story is not unique. Many of our programs have similar stories right now. The demand for the workforce is high. And so it's great that we can be there to support it. But in terms of those numbers, yes, that is something that we'll have to watch moving forward. But a good chunk of our kids for like auto collision, auto tech, construction, yes, those are 2-year pathways. But other areas, they still fit the 4-year route.
And a follow-up, I totally agree with Jason that this is a feather in our cap in this district. And I would like to see us not brag about it, but showcase it in some way. Yeah, why not brag? I wonder how we stack up statewide, and I also would like the community to understand that this is so incredibly relevant right at this moment in our country's history as we search for workers to run the place. And it couldn't be more relevant than it is in 2021 because we've all heard about the labor market crisis and us searching for workers as a nation. So this is exactly the kind of person they're talking about.
I was going to add, too, one thing that's really unique about the group that Adam and I belong to in terms of directors from around the state is they're very supportive and helpful of one another. They want to see our program grow, and any ideas that we share with them that would give them an opportunity to grow in their community, that just takes place in CTU. It's a powerful group to be a part of. And so, no, the story, Jamestown story is great. It is. But there are many CTE centers around the state that are seeing similar expansion. So it's an exciting time to be a part of it, that's for sure.
Jason?
And one thing I failed to maybe point out is we're not just talking about Jamestown, we're talking about the region, the economic region. Our cooperating school districts, would they have any financial obligation to this? How we relate with them, or would this be JPS's responsibility?
I can answer that. They pay tuition.
Okay.
So it would be part of tuition. We pay tuition also to the center. That's just part of how we support. But these expansions, we would bear the costs. We are always going to be part of CTC. They may not. We've seen the ebb and flow of member districts. So we wouldn't necessarily ask them to make a commitment outside of tuition.
Any other questions or comments? Well, we really want to thank you for coming. I think that was a great presentation. And as far as getting it out, I think even presenting to the JSDC is huge. I mean, I think they're in our community, and be able to present to them this presentation is very good. So thank you for taking that step.
Thank you.
Maybe as we transition here too, there are some things in the hopper that, that the directors are working on, you know, scheduling an open house for aviation, for example. We're waiting for, you know, the large flight simulator to be installed before we have that open house. So bringing people in will give a chance to talk about that one program, but it'll also give us a chance to talk about all of our programs. And the more people with eyes on, I think we'll really see the benefit of CTC.
And I do like that growth in the machining. I started out as a machinist, and now I get to sit here. Anyway, let's go forward. Item 4, Finance. Item A is approval of Building Tomorrow Leaders Grant in the amount of $9,333. What? Is that right? Okay, let's get this correct. $9,330. Got it. Motion by Heidi, second by Jason. Any? Yes. So the motion and second is to approve the $9,330 for the Tomorrow Leadership Grant. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 5, Personnel. Approval of an extended school year contract for Chantel Har for one additional semester of English Language Arts at the salary of $6,426.81. Okay, motion by Gail. Who was the second? Second by Roger. To approve this extended year contract for Chantel Har, and it's for one semester of English Language Arts at a salary of $6,426.81. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item B, approval of an extension school year contract for Michael Dietz for one additional semester of art at a salary of $5,701.88. Motion by Roger, second by Gail, to approve this extended year contract for Michael Dietz for the semester of arts and salary at the salary of $5,701.88. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item C, approval of an extended school year contract for Pam Smederberg for one additional session of physical education at a salary of $1,177.07. Motion by Jason, second by Dan. To approve this extended contract for Pam for physical education at a salary of $1,177.07. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, anything under policies and procedure? Looks like we're clear there. Item 7, tuition. Now, we have several tuitions to which we can go through individually if you like, or we can take it as kind of a consent to agree to these tuitions. I guess I'm open to whatever you would suggest. Heidi.
I'd like to make a motion to approve tuition agreements Make a motion to approve the tuition agreements under the agenda number 7, A through J.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second by Roger. I gotta get you guys' voices right. Yeah. Okay, to approve items A through J under one motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have nothing under 8. Other items for future agenda? Does anyone have anything specific they'd like to see? If you do have something, feel free to contact me or Dr. Leck, and we'll make sure we get them listed. Meetings to be scheduled. The DISC meeting on Thursday, September 9th at 3:30 in the Thompson Community Room. Item B is the Health Insurance Committee meeting on Monday, September 13th at 3:45 in the multipurpose room. Item C, School Board meeting on Monday, September 20th at 5:15 in the Thompson Community Room. And item D, the budget hearing that's scheduled also for September 20th at 6 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room. And of course, we know that specific meeting is open to the public as we will be going through the budget hearing. Yes, Heidi?
For the budget hearing, just for any public that may want to attend, can you just take a moment and just tell them where to park, where to enter if they want to come listen to that meeting or that hearing, and if they've not been to the middle school before?
Yeah, the middle school, what, you're looking at me like you're supposed to do this.
No, that's fine, I was just
No,
looking
go
in
ahead.
case you wanted me to.
I do.
Okay. So there's parking across from the middle school, Thompson Community Room, located within Jamestown Middle School. You could park on the south side diagonal parking off Third, or you could park across the street, across from Second, in the little parking lot by Johnny B's Brick House in that area. And at 6 o'clock, we'll adjourn where we're at in the agenda and begin the budget hearing at 6 o'clock, so it'll be consistent. People are certainly welcome to attend all of the meeting or just the budget hearing if they so choose, but it is an open public meeting.
Thank you. Item 6 is the monthly superintendent evaluation. And if you haven't already filled that out, please fill that out. And then at the,
Same link.
Yes, so we've had some issues for whatever reason with the hyperlink, sending it to a Google Help. You could always just copy and paste the link itself, or you can just use the link that I sent in an email. Both are the same, so, yeah.
yes. And item 7 is adjournment. If you want to right-click on that and fill out that. But with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you.